They're a nation of terror. This terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. We hear stuff like this all the time, right? It's the standard rhetoric about Iran. But what if I told you that not that long ago, America and Iran were actually best friends? So close, you won't believe this, the US basically handed Iran its own nuclear technology to get them started. Yeah, a little different from today's headlines. Just listen to this. In 1977, a sitting US president, Jimmy Carter, called Iran an island of stability. Not a threat, a partner. America's strongest, most reliable ally in the entire region. I mean, can you even imagine hearing those words today? It sounds like it's from a different planet. So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did that deep friendship just completely disintegrate? How did we get from island of stability to a member of the axis of evil? Well, let's dig into this incredible story of betrayal, mind-blowing excess, and ultimately, revenge.
To really get what went so wrong, we have to jump in the time machine and go way back to the 1950s, right after World War II. See, the world's superpowers had figured out two things that would basically define global power for the rest of the century. One was buried deep underground, and the other could wipe a city off the map.
Okay, so rule number one, oil is king. If you control the oil, you control the world economy. Rule number two, a nuclear bomb is the ultimate insurance policy. It's the one thing that guarantees your survival. Now, America had the bomb, but it didn't have the oil. And that single fact led them straight to Iran. Why? Because Iran had the third largest oil reserves on the planet and conveniently shared a huge border with America's number one rival, the Soviet Union. For the US, it was a perfect match. And for a little while, it really did seem perfect. The leader of Iran, the Shah, was treated like royalty whenever he visited the US. And in return, American culture just flooded into Iran's capital, Tehran. We're talking Hollywood movies in the cinemas, American-style suburbs, the whole deal. But, and this is a huge but, this entire golden era was hiding a really dark and ugly truth. On the surface, Iran looked like it was on the fast track to becoming a modern superpower. Its economy was booming, growing at 8, even 9% a year. Brand new highways and shiny skyscrapers were popping up all over Tehran. It looked incredible. It looked like progress. But it was all a grand illusion, because there were really two Irans. In one Iran, a tiny, wealthy elite drove around in American cars, went to fashion shows, and hung out in new shopping malls. But in the other Iran, the one where almost everybody else lived, there was massive inflation, crazy high unemployment, and get this, half the population didn't even have electricity. And if you want to know why people were so angry, you just have to follow the money. Look at this. A staggering 80% of all the revenue from Iran's own oil was going straight into the pockets of Western companies. Only 20% actually went to the Iranian government. So American corporations and the Shah's inner circle were getting fabulously rich, while the average Iranian family was struggling to put food on the table. That kind of anger, it doesn't just go away, it builds. And the spark that finally lit that powder keg was, of all things, a party. But hold on, this was not just any party. In 1971, the Shah threw a celebration so unbelievably over the top, so completely disconnected from the reality of his own people that it would ultimately cost him his entire country. The price tag? A cool $100 million. Back in 1971. Today, that's the equivalent of over $800 million, all for a 3-day party, while millions of his own people were going hungry. The details are just insane. He flew in 62 heads of state. He had 18,000 kilograms of gourmet food flown in from Paris, along with 25,000 bottles of vintage wine. He even imported 15,000 trees from Europe to literally create a forest in the middle of the desert. You can't make this stuff up. And this quote just says it all. The ordinary people of Iran, they weren't just not invited, they were physically kept away by the military, barricaded from a party that was supposed to be celebrating their history. The message was crystal clear. This wealth is not for you. You just can't humiliate an entire nation like that and expect things to stay the same. That feeling of anger and disrespect, it didn't just fade away. It festered, and it grew, and it turned into a revolutionary movement that would sweep away the old world and redraw the map of the Middle East forever. So after that party in '71, things started moving fast. Protests grew, led by a powerful religious figure in exile, the Ayatollah Khomeini. By January of 1979, the pressure was just too much. The Shah, America's closest friend in the region, was forced to flee the country. Just 1 month later, Khomeini returned to a massive hero's welcome and became the new supreme leader of Iran. And as soon as he took power, Khomeini made 3 decisive moves that completely torpedoed the relationship with America. First, he declared Iran an Islamic republic, crushing any hopes for democracy. Second, he supported militant students who stormed the U.S. embassy and took 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. And third, the big one, he nationalized the entire oil industry and kicked every single American and British company out of the country. As you can imagine, Washington was beyond furious. The feeling of betrayal was total. And America's reaction would lock both countries into this bitter, vicious cycle of retaliation that, you could argue, we're still stuck in to this very day. The U.S. hit back, and it hit back hard. It immediately froze $12 billion in Iranian assets. And then it did something that would have far more devastating consequences. It started backing Iran's neighbor and mortal enemy, Iraq, which was led by Saddam Hussein. The U.S. gave him money, weapons, and critical intelligence to wage a brutal war against Iran. That war lasted for 8 years and killed 500,000 people. And this, right here, is the moment that everything changes in Iran's strategic thinking. After watching the U.S. cripple its economy and then actively fuel a war against it, the leaders in Tehran came to a very logical, if pretty chilling, conclusion. The only way to guarantee your country's survival against a superpower that has a history of taking out its enemies is to get the ultimate deterrent, to get a nuclear capability. For them, it wasn't a weapon to attack. It was a shield to survive. So all of that history we just went through, it isn't really history at all. It's the direct cause of the dangerous conflict we're all watching today. These decades of betrayal and revenge have led us straight to this permanent state of nuclear standoff, where one wrong move by either side could be catastrophic. You know, there was a brief moment of hope back in 2015. The Obama administration worked out a deal. Iran agrees to halt its nuclear program, and in return, the world lifts the crushing economic sanctions. And for a while, it actually worked. But in 2018, the U.S. unilaterally pulled out of that deal and slapped all the sanctions back on. Iran's response? They restarted their nuclear program, which brings us to the crisis we're in right now. So what's the big lesson here? Well, it's a pretty harsh one about how the world really works. This whole story is proof that in the ruthless game of geopolitics, there really are no permanent friends or permanent enemies. There are only permanent interests. And as we saw, friends can become foes in the blink of an eye. And this slide really boils the entire conflict down to its core. When the U.S. and its allies look at Iran, they see a dangerous rogue state trying to build a weapon of mass destruction. But when Iran looks at its own nuclear program, it sees a defensive shield. It sees the only insurance policy that can protect it from what it views as decades of betrayal and attack. And that leaves us with the terrifying question we're all facing now. After all this history, after all the betrayals and the endless cycles of revenge, where do we possibly go from here? Is there a path for this to end with a diplomatic handshake? Or are we just watching the slow, inevitable march towards a catastrophic war?